So hello, thank you all so much for joining us for this presentation of UTC Then and Now, 1970 to 2020. I'm going to ask you to please mute yourselves as we get ready to begin the presentation, but we'll come back, and I think everybody knows everybody, which is great, but we'll come back at the end and just do a quick introduction. How about that? But on behalf of the UTC Alumni Board of Directors, also the UT Alumni Association, and the more than 60,000 alumni that we serve. We want to thank you for being here and congratulate you for your 50th reunion. You all are the first official graduating class of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And we are thrilled to be able to share this with you. You're so deserving of more than just a virtual event, but we hope we can make up for that next fall for you. We want to kick off this presentation and just kind of give you a little bit of a here and now kind of or then and now kind of comparison. And I couldn't think of anybody better to do that than what I call the effervescent Dr. Valerie Rutledge. And let me tell you just a little bit about her, if you don't mind. Dr. Valerie Copeland Rutledge serves as the Dean of the College of Health, Education, and Professional Studies here at UTC. Now, that college entails graduate and undergraduate programs, everything from interior design, social work, education, nursing, health and human performance, also the learning and leadership doctoral program, nursing, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. Prior to joining the UTC faculty in 1995, Dr. Rutledge taught English, Latin, and drama in the Hamilton County school systems and was recognized as not only Hamilton County Teacher of the Year, Southeast Tennessee Teacher of the Year, and Tennessee High School Teacher of the Year in 1986. Dr. Rutledge's expertise lies in the areas of literacy, foreign language instruction, and English as a second language, also teacher training. She holds bachelor's degrees and a master's degree from UTC in secondary education and received her doctorate degree in higher education leadership studies from UT Knoxville. We won't hold that against her. She also wants you to know that what is most important is that she is a proud alumna of UTC with those 2 degrees that have helped her enter a profession that she strongly believes in that will strengthen our community. And she's excited to be here today to take you down memory lane. So with that, I will turn it over to our very own Dr. Valerie Rutledge.
Okay, so let me say just a couple of things before I start. Number one, Gay and I worked together when I first came to UTC, and she was choreographing for the Singing Mocks.
That's right.
And all of those programs that surrounded and were delivered by Glenn Draper. And Janie and I go back to junior high, where we were in junior high together, and then we split apart, and she went to another unnamed high school in town. And then we all came back down here together. So when Andrea asked me to do this, I couldn't think of anything more exciting, because when I look back through the annuals and picked up the things I'm going to share with you today, it was like my own walk back through history as well. So I hope you'll see some of the things. If you have questions at the end, I may not be able to answer them, but one of us may be able to. But I would start by saying UTC is not what it was back then, but in some ways it is. So I'm going to share with you a lot of the things that came out of my search going back 50 years. And now there we go. Okay, so the theme for this year's homecoming was here, there, marks are everywhere. And particularly now, you know, we couldn't have our tailgate. We couldn't have our on-campus supper that we normally would have had, where we would have gotten to reminisce and talk about how old everybody else looks and how young we still look. But, you know, we'll do the best we can on this. And because Andrea is recording it, you'll have a chance to go back and watch it over and over and over again if you want to. So if you look back at what things cost in 1970, Janie and I graduated from high school in the spring of 1970, and then we came to UTC in the fall. But I look back and I thought, oh my goodness, you know, if I could buy gas for 36 cents a day on the gallon, or if I could buy a new house for $23,450, I would be ecstatic. But clearly that's not the case. Although at the same time, salaries have risen and other things have changed as well. When I looked at the movies, it dawned on me how many of them were about war and how many of them were about people in service. So even though they might have been comedies, a lot of them focused on that and kind of reminded us where we were. We had a lot of friends that went away to the Vietnam conflict. Most of them came back, some of them did not, and those who served were very proud to have served. And I think it kind of captured that moment in time. that we all saw when those things were going on around us. But here is what I thought was fascinating. I'll play you a little clip while you look through this list. But look how many of them were the Jackson 5 and the Partridge Family. Probably not anything like the raps that we hear today, but clearly the music of the time. So I think you could probably sing it on your own. If I were to turn the music off and let you all go and the mic was on, we'd probably have a great serenade from all of you. But it kind of made me remember that if you look through look how many songs were popular that year by the Jackson 5. I remember, as I'm sure you all do, the Carpenters, who were another very talented musical group. And when we look at music nowadays, it's a very different kind of music. A lot of it's technical. A lot of it has to do with things that were not even in existence back then. So just in case, things that I didn't necessarily remember from 1970, but that were significant current events were these. The first episode of All My Children. I don't know about you all, but when I was in high school, we rushed home to watch Dark Shadows and got off the bus and went in to make sure we could watch it that afternoon. And there were a lot of other people who had a favorite soap opera and came home to watch it. Soap operas are not the same nowadays. Plus, however many channels we have on the television, it's almost innumerable. They all have their own stars and their own shows and things like that. I didn't realize Earth Day was 50 years old. Ironic that Earth Day was founded or established 50 years ago, and we're still talking about the environment and the impact on the environment. I do remember the Kent State shootings, though, because that was, I think, a critical moment in time, not just for Kent State, but for all of higher ed, when you have young people who go away, and then the things that go on when they're away at college are things that shape their lives forever. And then finally, a sad day, Paul McCartney announced that the Beatles were breaking up. So all of the major events that took place back then are things that kind of remind us where we were and what happened. These are things that also turned 50 this year, and some of them you may have had yourself. So either a Ford Pinto or a Chevy Vega, and I will tell you that I chose the most subtle colors. There were some unique bright blues and some other things that were around back then that we probably wouldn't see now. It seems like most of our vehicles nowadays are silver and black and various shades of that, but we had some truly unique colors back then. And in looking at them, I thought, I'm not a car person. I buy them for the way they look or the way the color looks. But if you'll notice, I didn't realize how much alike the style of these two cars was. And who knows, one of you all may have either had one or dated someone who had one. Also, it's a 50-year anniversary for the New York Marathon. The Boeing 747, who we know has had its own little issues recently, was first launched that year. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a little bit older now, looks slightly different than he did back then. I think all of us either had or had friends who had Corelle ware that they ate off of. You know, it was unbreakable. I can remember my dad buying some for my mother, and to prove it was unbreakable, using it as a Frisbee across the floor in the living room to prove that it truly did stand up to whatever it was they had advertised themselves. The Jackson 5 turned 50 this year, and then also Irish Spring soap. So it's interesting to me to see what's lasted and what hasn't. And then, of course, the whole issue with the call where they said, Houston, we've got a problem, was all a part of what turned 50 just this year. So here are sports. Some of you may remember some of these. So I've got from 1970 to 2020. Back then, the World Series champs were the New York Mets. This year, unfortunately, it is not the Braves. We don't know yet, but they've started the World Series. We're on a little bit different time frame. New York Jets won the Super Bowls. I think the people who are supporters of the Jets right now would be a little bit surprised because it was a very different time back then. And like every other team, they've gone through good and bad years. And this seems to be, they're trying to head back in the other direction. Kansas City Chiefs behind Patrick Mahomes won the Super Bowl this past year. Boston Celtics back then won the NBA championship, and the LA Lakers just about a week ago won the NBA championship. So all of them are still around. Those teams are still there. They have gone through sometimes more successful ventures and time frames than others, but they are still there. All of us probably remember this. Coming to register was a lengthy experience, and you'll recognize McClellan Gym the tables that were set up everywhere, the punch cards that you were given, and then you took them over to a table and you got that card and hung on to it so you could register for the classes you wanted it. This is what it looks like now. It is all online. When you decide to register, you go and pick up the classes that you need. There is a form that tells you what you need for your program. You're able to look through the schedule and you make your schedule out. However, lots of things that have changed and lots of things are the same. So if you look at these pictures, you'll see that these are various gatherings. Some of them are protests. These are the main topics back then. Does it not sound like very much what we see around us today? And I had to laugh when I looked at the annual, and some of you may remember this. There was a protest in the dorm because the dryers weren't working. And so all the girls protested because they weren't able to dry their hair. And I mean, how can you look good if you can't dry your hair? But the others were some more serious protests. And notice that back then, they were talking about equality for women. They were talking about all the other issues that people face. So I think the difference now, at least my take on the difference now, is a lot of it is more visible by social media. And so back then, it was a very short time frame, and then we moved on to the next thing. I can remember, and I'm sure some of you all can too, when I was a senior my last semester, streaking was the thing. Now, I will have to say I did not streak. You will find no pictures of me streaking. And yet, there are probably people who did streak who are thankful that social media and iPhones were not around. And so there is very little evidence that they took part in that at that particular time. There were queens that were named that were selected by the different groups that were here on campus. Grody Hall was dedicated. Grody Hall is still here, and the pictures on the right show you what it looks like today. It is also undergone in the last few years a renovation so that the furniture, the rooms, the labs, and everything have been completely redone. Predominantly chemistry and other labs are in there, but if you had a class in Grody named after Professor Grody, then you would have seen a hall that on the outside looks very similar, but on the inside has undergone a significant facelift. Back then, the dorms were different. For those of you who might have had the opportunity, and I use that word very loosely, to live in Pfeiffer Stagmeyer, there were bathrooms down the hall for you and 100 of your closest friends. And you can see the outside of the stadium dorms where you got to live underneath the football games and see what was going on. The dorms now look very different. In fact, we don't have any dorms that have shared bathrooms down the hall. They are more apartment style. So the newest dorm is the top left dorm, which is called West Campus. It has not only the floors that you see here, but underneath it has a 2-level parking garage where the students can actually purchase reserve parking and can reside under there. And it is over on Vine Street, which is beyond where campus even extended back then. The others that you see, the one on the top right is Lockmiller, which is down in front of the Fine Arts Center now, again, beyond where campus extended them. And on the left bottom, you see the one of those residence halls that's across Macaulay Avenue. So there's a whole group of dorms built over there that are on the south side of campus, and they are basically like apartments. They range from 1 bedroom to 4 bedroom. Some of them have washers and dryers inside the dorms. So it's a very different experience than they had back then. And then on the right at the bottom, you see Johnson O'Bear, a very popular residence hall that's right in the middle of campus. Well, I should say now it's in the middle of campus. Back then it would have been beyond the footprint of campus. So I don't know about you, but I had known the library as the public library. And then when you came to UTC, the other side was where UTC and all of their books and magazines were housed. I can remember going up to the, it was behind a wire where the lady, you gave her your piece of paper and she went and found your magazine and she gave it back to you, and then you were able to go sit down and study. It is now home to the Rollins College of Business, and it still sits on Macaulay Avenue at what used to be the edge of campus. But about 5.5 years ago, they built a new library. And so if you haven't had a chance to be in the new library, you can see it in the bottom middle of the page. It's different in lots of ways, predominantly technology rules. Lots of spaces students can reserve and go study in. Also on the left-hand side, there is a Starbucks that's attached to the library that stays open longer than the library does. And there is a section open where students can study after hours. Then on the top right, it's on the top floor looking out over McClellan Gym is the Roth Reading Room. And it gives you a beautiful view, not only of campus, but of our community. And you can see the Arc, you can see the arena, but it is designed to look much like you might find a library in one of the Library of Congress or one of the huge institutions that we have seen in other different places. And you see the lamps and the wood that's everywhere. We used the Gary Center. Our bookstore was underneath it. We had a snack bar. I can remember us having pep rallies in the middle of the Gary that's on the left-hand side here. On the right, what you see is the recently remodeled Gary. It is home to the Honors College. Honors College has around 200 and something students in it now. Notice that it's decorated in blue and gold. They did retain the wood that we can see right here, so you can see the fireplace and everything, but it is a very different building now than it was back then. Still in the middle of campus or still on the edge of campus and still used quite a bit. And if you look at the top here, those are glass walls that you can look out onto the floor of the reading room that's there. In 1970, they dedicated the moccasin to Arlie Herron. I was an English ed major and had quite a few classes from Arlie Herron. He looked just like he does in this picture. He was as gracious as he could be, and for a time he served as the department head of the English department. I'm sure a lot of people, many of you probably included, have memories of Arlie Herron and what he looked like and what he did when he was here on campus, and made a lasting impression, he and many other people who were there. So we also had Greek Week. So Greek Week was different back then. Some of the pictures that you may even see yourself. Some of these pictures of the activities and things that went on back during Greek Week. Most of the organizations had an event, or maybe they partnered together with others and had an event. You can see the chariot race on the bottom left over there. You can also see the girls on the right who were in their bathing suits and were being judged. You probably wouldn't see that nowadays. Not that they wear more clothes, but just that they wouldn't participate in something like this. And of course, you can see that they won the trophy at the end. This is the difference in our Greek population now. So back in 1970, the organizations that were Greek that were in existence are those at the top. At the bottom, these are the ones we have now. And if you haven't been on campus recently, we all remember that back then, the girls did not live in their they did not live in their homes. They were not allowed to do so. The men did on a limited basis. Now several of the sororities have built brand new sorority houses. They are off campus. They are close to where Cavalier used to be, right off campus off Central Avenue, and it's almost a little pod. Chi Omega has plans to build a house that's down there close to Ingalls Stadium. And so they have moved off campus. And they've all moved off campus. The only exceptions who still live where they did, the Lambda Chi house is still where it was. The Kappa Sig house is still where it was. Sigma Chi house burned a number of years ago, and they have put up a home behind Chattanooga School for the Arts and Sciences. And so you see some changes. Greek organizations are very different now. They don't start with the whole idea of pledges. You are called by different names, might be associate members. It's not the I don't want to say hazing, that's a terrible word. It's not the treatment that pledges used to have when we were all here as undergraduates, but there's a significant number that are now here on campus. And regularly we are approached by other Greek organizations to say, would you be interested in allowing us to colonize on your campus? And we have added several of those that you can see over the years. So the sports at UTC are different now too. And we all know that Title IX came along, and part of what we look at now is not just what sports, but the equality of the distribution of sports. And so they look to see, are you affording women opportunities to play sports and participate just like you are men? And so as I share with you some of these, I'll add a couple of those, just information about those that we've added since then. Many of you will remember the football team. You can see Harold Wilkes there in the middle of the screen. He continued to coach for a number of years. In fact, passed away not too long ago. We lost some really important people not too long ago. But you see here the picture of the men playing back then. And there are a couple of things that I'm going to share with you in a little while that I did not know until I looked at this that almost are a throwback to what we saw then. Scrappy Moore, picture of Scrappy Moore, and all the things, you know, so many things around here are related back to him. I will say this, the mascots have changed. I know you all are aware of that. We had Chief Chattanooga at one point. We had the guy who dressed up like a shoe at one point. We went through all sorts of things. At one point, our mascot wore a railroad uniform and a railroad hat and drove a locomotive We now have a mascot that looks more like, I'd say, a streamlined Seattle Seahawks almost. And you'll see that toward the end, but it's gone through several iterations. It is still a mock. I think we've all wondered what a mock was, and we finally decided we're just going to call whatever we want to a mock. And so that's what we've ended up doing over that period of time. We did have wrestling back then, in fact, quite a successful wrestling program. You may recognize some of the pictures that are in here. We still have a very successful wrestling program. Although, just as an aside, I'm anxious to see what we're able to do this year because it's a different kind of sport than any of the other sports that we offer here, and how they're going to arrange that, I'm not quite sure. We also had a basketball team. Some of you may see Leon Ford, who was the basketball coach back then. He was replaced by Ron Shoemate. We've had a series of other coaches in the last several years. We now have Coach Lamont Paris, who has been with us for probably 3 years now. He's a wonderful coach. So if you haven't been to the basketball games, you might want to come and watch them. I understand, fingers crossed, we are going to play, and we're going to play in the arena, maybe with some limitations on numbers of people that can be there. But you may see people on here that you remember, and I remember because they were not all seniors. And so they were still here after Janie and I came, and they played for the next several years. We did have tennis and golf teams back then. We still have tennis and golf teams. But the difference is we also have women's golf. We also have women's tennis. We have added women's basketball. We have women's soccer. We have women's volleyball and beach volleyball. So all of those sports that came along in the last few years kind of contributed to that Title IX effort. And a lot of those are there. We did have some things back then. And what happened back then, and you can see it here, we did have a baseball team. The baseball team played for the most part at Ingle Stadium. The number of people on a team, because it's part of Title IX, you have to look at that balance. And those that had lots of members that were male tipped it over in that direction. And over a period of years, some of those sports are no longer played. However, I will tell you this, we have a number of club sports. And some of those club sports are not only competitive, our baseball club won 2 years ago the national championship. So there's still opportunities for competition and for recognition. It's just at a different level. They are not scholarship sports. They are sports that compete with other colleges that also have club sports. So it's a little bit different structure than it was back then. So here's what I found most interesting. If you look at the article on the left, it talks about our football team being hit hard by heat and a virus. Well, over on the right, just about a month and a half ago, it says COVID-19 pandemic has caused major challenges for our football team, and it was related to a virus. So it's almost like it's come back full circle. You know, and you see happening now, I wonder how many people who were here with the football team then would remember that episode and then relate it to what we're going through nowadays. These were the cheerleaders. Some of them were still here for a few years. They weren't all seniors. They did wear blue and gold. They still wear blue and gold. Outfits look different. Very seldom will you see the heavy sweater and things like they wore back then, but they do still have male cheerleaders. They went through a time frame where there were not as many males and we had a limited number, but now there is a male partner for every one of the females, and they do a lot of partner stunts. They have competed at the national level against other higher education institutions over the last several years, and they are another part of the support squads for our sports. In addition, there is a Sugar Mocks group that many of you have seen, which is a dance group that also performs at football and at basketball. And so you see a lot of things that have emerged over the last few years. So when you get to academics and you look at the kinds of things that were going on back then and some of the things that we have now, our chancellor back then was Chancellor Masterson. It is now Steve Angle. Some of you have probably met him or seen him. He has finished 7 years. He started on his 8th year. He came here from Wright State, and he has 2 children who were kindergarten and 2nd grade when he came, who are now in middle school and high school. So he's been here quite a while. His background is chemistry, but he came after we had an interim for 1 year, and then he was the one who was selected and has been leading the institution since 2013. So some of the differences, back then we had 12 international students and thought we were doing pretty good. I checked with them yesterday, and these are our international students now. We have 150 international students, and you can see the whole list of countries that are listed there. And not only do we have these students, we also send students to other countries. Now, I will have to say we have been limited in what we can do the last few months because some of our countries are not as open as they normally would be. But we do have partnerships with institutions and organizations in all of those countries that are listed. So there is an office that works specifically with these students. and brings them to our campus, and they pursue degrees that they would have pursued there, and they're able to finish their studies and complete them here. So back then, many of you may remember on the bottom floor of McClellan Gym, this was the swimming pool. The swimming pool has not been functional for years now. I couldn't tell you how long. And partly it was because of this. Several years ago, the students voted through a fee to fund the Aquatic and Recreation Center. They designed or helped design the swimming area. And so you can see the slide. This is a lazy river that's over on the right. There are times when they have movie screens set up, and they will get in their little inner tubes and they'll float around the lazy river and they'll watch the movies and so forth. And there's also a section that has lanes for lane swimming. So you've got all of those things. When the Ark was built, it was built with student fees, and they were the ones who were able to design it. If you looked on the other side of the Ark, it has an indoor basketball court. It has dance studios. It has workout facilities, including everything from a rock climbing wall to treadmills and all of those kinds of things. And they also allow students to check out canoes or to check out tents or to check out things that they would use if they were going on some kind of outdoor hike. So the money that they collect from the student fees are used to allow the students to do all sorts of things that they find interesting. And I will have to say, when they said they were building that, I said, who's going to use it? They use it all the time. When I come on campus in the morning, there are students who have already worked out, who are headed back to their dorms or to classes. So clearly it's something that was an investment. A little aside, I will say this, earlier than this, quite a bit earlier than this, there used to be a swim team at UTC, and they were called the Water Moccasins. So we have given them up. We don't have a swim team anymore. Not sure how many people would feel comfortable swimming if their name was the Water Moccasin, but who knows. This is what our tennis courts look like now. We formerly had next to a modular, is the best thing I could use to describe it, a modular racquetball center. That was moved out several years ago, and you can see the tennis courts in the middle. You can see the facility where they have bleachers, and they also store a lot of the equipment. And of course, it's blue and gold. And just barely on the left of your screen, you can see the edge of the arena. So it's right there across. McClellan would be straight in front of you, and then to the left is the arena. So it's down there almost in what I would call an athletic pod here on campus, because you've got a lot of physical activity things that go on in that particular area. The C Club is still alive and well, although the people who were there in '70 looked a little different when they walked across the field and were recognized in last year at the football game. But still, I think the interesting thing to me is how many people have maintained contact and how many people have stayed involved at UTC in a lot of different ways. And for those of you who recognize him, this is Charlie Pierce right here. I think Charlie Pierce is unmistakable. And if he weren't wearing blue and gold, he would probably be wearing some very bright, unusual color and the shoes to match. We all know that Ingle Stadium's been down there a long time, and Ingle Stadium was where our baseball team played when they played. And then not too far from there, we had intramurals. It is no longer used as a baseball field or a baseball stadium, but look what they have done to Ingle Stadium. The property next to it has been turned into a sports complex. We do not use Ingle Stadium right now because it's in a condition where they're going to have to make some decisions about what to do. But you can see the green space is all of the fields that they have created. They are soccer fields. The intramurals can use it. Some of our club sports use it. Our band practices down there. Then if you see the map that's laid out, there is actually a building there where they house a lot of the equipment. And over to the right is our beach volleyball area, so that when the weather warms up in the spring, we'll actually have beach volleyball. I didn't know there was such a thing in college, but clearly there is. And what we started with last year was girls who were already on the volleyball team who simply played 2 seasons. My understanding is they will begin in the future recruiting specifically for beach volleyball. So who knows, maybe we'll end up with somebody on an Olympic team sometime, and we can say they got their start at Ingle Stadium. So the radio on campus back then, I'm sure you recognize what it looked like. On campus now is what radio looks like with all of the technology and the things, and you may even listen to them sometimes on the radio when you're on your way in the morning. They do carry a variety of different types of shows. They do some podcasts that they stream and so forth. This is a unique thing that has encouraged since back then. The UC Foundation gave $250,000 to a group of UTC students in the College of Business. They are investors They invest the money, and then they take the profit and turn it back around. And they now have, as a result of their intelligent investment, grown that fund to over $600,000. I'm thinking I need to give them some money, and that perhaps that will, guarantee that my retirement will be a much happier condition than it might be otherwise. But they go through a selection process, and they have to indicate an interest, and they have to interview. So clearly they have targeted some very talented young people. Back then we sent students to the Model UN. We now send them to American Mock Trial, and our team has been very successful in making it to the competition at the national level. You see here the students that competed just last year, and the fact that we started out with almost 800 teams and only the top 48 make it, I think says a lot for the quality of the team that UTC has put forward. Back in '69, right after '69, they had established a computer science department. It has grown and is a part of the College of Engineering Computer Science, and this is our third year that we competed in the MOX rocket team, where we compete with other institutions that have computer science programs, and they build a rocket and they launch it, and they're measured on how far it goes, how high it goes, but you have to find it and bring it back if it goes somewhere else. So a year or so ago, it went into a swamp, and they spent, I couldn't tell you how long, but they finally found it and brought it back successfully. So it's become a very competitive kind of thing, but they have been first place in the nation, which I think says a lot for these young men. So you may remember Oak Street not being totally closed off. Vine Street wasn't at all. You could drive through the middle of campus and just hope somebody didn't run over you while you were walking. This is what they proposed to do back then. If you haven't been on campus recently, this is what Oak Street looks like. It looks like a college campus. There is no traffic at all in the middle of campus on Oak Street. You can see it from several different directions. The direction that's over here on the bottom left is standing down by what used to be the Chancellor's house and looking down Oak Street. The top left is where if you were standing at Hunter Hall looking in the other direction. And this is just the long picture standing from the Geary Center and looking that way. Changes completely the look of campus, because not only do you not have traffic, but it really does set the tone. And this is now what Vine Street looks like. It is also closed. So there is no traffic on Vine Street. On the top left is the University Center, which was doubled in size a few years ago. You can see the students walking on the street, which looks very much like they did Oak Street. And then here you see again, looking out in another direction. This is the UC on the bottom right. You can see the steps. And then for those of you who remember Brock Hall, that's what you see on the left hand there. Things that were important to us back then are still important. We still have queens that are crowned. They're now a homecoming queen in the top mocks, or if there's a male that's identified as well. You can see the football competition up there, or the people in the stands after that. We're in Finley Stadium now, and I know all of you know where Finley Stadium is, but I think people still have a high level of enthusiasm. Many of you may remember we had ROTC back then, and some of the resistance to ROTC functioned around the Vietnam conflict. We have ROTC back again, and you'll see on the right the young men and women who compete. Lots of times when I come on campus in the morning, they will be finishing up their run, and they have their rucksacks on, and how they make it that long and far, I don't know. I admire them. I don't plan to sign up. These are just a few. This is not all of them. These are programs that have been added since 1970, and I captured just a few. There are many, many more. Significant number of graduate programs offered. First doctoral program offered. The nursing, Doctor of Nursing Practice, and the Doctor of Physical Therapy, and the Doctor of Occupational Therapy are all clinical doctorates. They are extended practice where people become much more proficient. But we do have a PhD in Learning and Leadership. There's also a Computational Engineering PhD, and there are a number of other things that you see here, along with others that are not listed. We also now have a completely separate honors college and a completely separate College of Engineering and Computer Science. So what emerged was things that had started out as departments or programs, in many instances have actually grown into entire colleges. So as you look and kind of peruse what's happened back then. Students are still the same. They still do unusual things and get themselves caught in photos. I've often wondered when people go back and look at these, that they're going to go, oh, what was I thinking? But you never know. But I think all of us remembered our graduation, although I will have to say, I am not sure who else has CREEP in their alma mater. But this is the words to the alma mater. And finally, I think I would say we've been, like I said earlier, an Indian chief, we've been a shoe, we've been an engineer, but it doesn't really matter what the image is. I think all of us have a special set of memories about UTC and what it was when we were there. So no matter what it looks like, once a mock, always a mock. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Valerie. That was great, being able to take a trip back down memory lane and see all of the great things that make our university so great and so special and dear to each of us. So I want to thank each of you. And while we have a few minutes remaining, I'd like to go through and I'll just call your name, if you don't mind, and you just kind of tell us your name, your major, and what some highlights, just a few highlights of your career and what you've done in the last few years. So I'm going to start with my screen, and Sandy, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and just introduce and start us off, please.
Okay. I was Sandy Swafford, now I'm Hartley, and I actually went the extra year and got my master's degree. But back then I had to take, I was a math major for both undergraduate and graduate. And so I didn't get the degree until 1972 because I had to take certain classes that they only offered every other year. Mm-hmm. But I ended up teaching part-time at UTC in the evening when I went back to my alma mater, Chattanooga High School, and taught math there for 10 years. And then ended up coming back to UTC full-time for a couple of years before children. And then I stayed home, and then I came back. I don't remember what year that was, but I worked at the Challenger Center part-time, and I also came back into the math department and did that full-time for another couple of years. So I have strong ties there, and Janie knows, and I've seen Valerie, and Valerie and I are sorority sisters. But we love the football and the basketball, and so we've really enjoyed going to all of that. And I'm sad that we're not getting to do it this fall, but I'm excited that they're going to do it in the spring for the football.
Yes. February 20th, I think, is the first date on that for a home game. So mark your calendars for that. But thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. Let me go down to Kenton. Kenton, can you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about your major and what you're doing now, or what you did shortly after you graduated? I think he may have stepped away. Okay, how about Jay Platt? Can you unmute?
Yeah, I'm here. I was a business major and a Pike and played tennis, and I went on to East Tennessee State. I went in the military for 3 years, then went to East Tennessee State University for my master's, and then went to work for IBM for 35 years and retired from there and ended up in Nashville.
Great, thank you so much. Chris, how about you?
Well, I remember Jay Platt. I don't see him on the screen. I remember Gay, and I watched the other day that tour of campus that you put together, and I thought that was very good. I think your husband was a fraternity brother of mine. I was a Kappa Sig. I majored in sociology, I was in ROTC. So when I graduated, I went in the Army for a couple of years. Luckily, I didn't have to go into combat. But one thing I'm proud of recently, I worked with B.B. Bell and Janie Holder to get a plaque there at Chamberlain Pavilion honoring the Army ROTC program where we used to march there. And of course, Gay, I think you were an Army Angel at one time, weren't you? No? Well, I'm thinking of someone else. Anyway, the classes were there. So there is a bronze plaque up there, you'll notice. I went to the dedication, when they dedicated the pavilion, and it was all about football, but nothing about what the other uses of the stadium were. So I was proud that that happened. After the Army, I went to work for the Department of Energy. I lived all around the country. I came down to Chattanooga from Maryland. I'm originally from Chattanooga, but my father was in the Air Force, so we moved all around. But my dad was a chemistry major, and Dr. Grody was his mentor. So my dad ended up getting a nuclear chemistry degree from Ohio State after Chattanooga. I have 4 children, 6 grandchildren. 2 of my children, the oldest, Katie McCorkle, teaches at St. Nicholas. She was an education major. Andrew also graduated, both of them got their master's degrees at Chattanooga as well. So Andrew's down in Florida.
That is great.
Selling water treatment. But
not only
anyway,
you're in a band. You're in a band.
What? Oh, the band, yeah. My avocation is the Mount LeConte Jug Band, which we've played a number of things for the alumni when Janie was head there, and also Ms. Lyons was there. And we played for the Chancellor. We played for, I forget the gentleman who was head of the UT system a few years ago. But anyway, if you have a charity and you want the best free band around, although we do get paid occasionally, but right now we're in lockup.
Well, we put in that shameless plug for you, Chris. So we appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I will turn the mic over to some other folks.
Sure. Let's recognize, since you mentioned Ms. Holder, Janie Holder, who really needs no introduction, but just tell us how you're enjoying life these days.
First, thanks to Valerie. As she mentioned, I'm not in your class. I started the fall after you graduated, but anytime Valerie's going to present, I like to hear my friend because she always does such a great job. As most of you know, Valerie was a cheerleader when she was a student, and she is still one of UTC's biggest cheerleaders, so we really do appreciate her. Plus, I knew I was going to get to see or have the opportunity to see some of you who I have missed since retirement and COVID. I think we're all missing personal relationships, but I have recently retired as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Alumni Affairs at UTC and am enjoying this time. It seems strange that it's homecoming week and I'm not missing planning tailgates and golf tournaments, so an unusual time, but just like so many of you, UTC changed my life and has been a blessing. And I just feel very fortunate to have spent so many years there. And thank you all for being involved. Several of you I have worked with on alumni events. And so I appreciate your engagement. Thanks again, Valerie and Andrea, for putting this together.
Oh, thank you, Janie. And yes, Valerie, phenomenal job. And last but certainly not least, Miss Gay Slayton, would you please share with the class? You need to unmute. There you go.
There we go. I was clicking the wrong microphone. Yes, well, I was, and yes, Chris, I do remember you as well. And yes, my husband was a Kappa Sig. So you were fraternity brothers. I was Gay Sellers and became Gay Sellers Slayton when I married Johnny, who I met at UTC, or it was UC then. So yes, the university changed my life in very many ways. My major was anthropology and sociology, but I never did anything with that particular major. Because I got involved my junior and senior year with the Chattanooga Singers and Chamber Singers and singing mocks, and I was doing the choreography for the singing mocks just on scholarship when I was a student. And after Glenn Draper came, my life changed completely, and I ended up working for him as his choral assistant and the choreographer from 70 when I graduated till 78 full-time, and then I continued to work part-time as just the choreographer for the singing mocks, and Chattanooga Singers did some choreography occasionally. But those were wonderful days. Went on a lot of trips, got to go on a 9-week USO tour and sing for the troops, and it was an amazing time. I think that upcoming trip that Glenn was talking about might have had something to do with my deciding to stay and work for him. But I met a lot of wonderful people through him, including Andrea.
And a choreographer my senior year, so.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that, Andrea.
No, the only thing
as I said when she asked me to do the virtual tour, I said, I'm pretty cheesy, you know, like the queen of cheese. At least that's what my sons say. So Johnny and I have been married for 49 years, this October 30. And we have 2 sons, Colin, who is an architect, and he went to UTK, and he lives in New York City. He's married, has no children. And then my second one is Chris, and he is a teacher at CCS and has 2 children. So thankfully I have 2 grandchildren. And so I worked there at university until Chris was born in '83. And then, like Sandy, I was mom for a while. And then after that, after they were in high school, I worked as admissions director for a private elementary school in town. And then I quit that, and I've just been enjoying life since.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for giving us a little bit of your time and sharing with us, but also getting a chance, even though you can't come back physically due to COVID-19 right now. This is the next best thing. And we do want to remind you that if you go to our alumni webpage, there is a page dedicated to the class of 1970. With, as you've heard, there are all kinds of videos, welcomes from the chancellor, from our SGA president, a wonderful stroll through time that Gay provided for us. This video will also be posted on that page, and there's even a service of remembrance for classmates who have passed away. So please share that with your fellow classmates who maybe missed out on this. It will be posted, and we'll leave it up for several weeks so you'll get a chance to share and reminisce until we can all get together face to face. But again, I'm Andrea Lyons. I'm serving as interim assistant vice chancellor for alumni affairs. And it is my pleasure to be able to present things like this to you and to our alumni. So if all minds are clear, thank you all so much for joining us. Again, Dr. Rutledge, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge and insight with us today. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week and a happy homecoming. Go Mocs.
Thank you.